Should we laud Hitler as the greatest anti-communist? Recently on X, a Christianish young fellow asked why we don't laud Hitler, since he was the greatest anti-communist of all time. My typical response to such sentiments is, don't get me started. But one can only say that so many times before one has to say, now you got me started. Hitler was anti-communist in the same way that Stalin was anti-communist, which is to say, they were both against anyone who threatened their own dictatorial power. When George Orwell traveled to Spain as an idealistic young socialist in 1936 to fight alongside all the other socialists in the Spanish Civil War, he found himself running for his life. But it was not from General Franco's fascist troops, it was from Joseph Stalin's socialist troops, whose first priority was not fighting the enemy, but eliminating the competition, all the other socialists. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Stalin was conducting his famous show trials in which he was framing and executing all potential competition, including his socialist comrades who helped him gain power. All of that is what opened Orwell's eyes and put him on the road to writing Animal Farm in 1984. Totalitarianism in any form and by any name was his enemy now. Communist socialism, in theory, is globalist, as opposed to nationalist. But Stalin was as nationalist as Hitler during World War II, for you see, Russians would not fight and die for the workers of the world, but they would fight and die for Mother Russia. Conversely, Hitler was as globalist as Stalin, for they both wanted to rule as much territory as possible, they both subjugated numerous surrounding countries, and they both murdered millions of their own citizens. For statists like Stalin and Hitler, socialism, communism, fascism, even democracy are all terms they manipulate to serve their own dictatorial purposes. American statists do the same. Thus, Woodrow Wilson in the early 1900s contended that democracy and socialism are really the same. He said, in fundamental theory, socialism and democracy are almost, if not quite, one and the same. They both rest at bottom upon the absolute right of the community, the state, to determine its own destiny and that of its members. So what then is the true enemy of this statist family tree? It's not any of its squabbling children, but something outside the family altogether. Christianity. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. That's what Antonio Gramsci said, and he was the father of cultural Marxism and the grandfather of the modern woke movement. So Stalin and Hitler didn't get along in the same way that ancient Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus the Great, Alexander the Great, and Caesar Augustus didn't get along. If you ask them why, they would say, because of our many differences. But if you ask their subjects, they would say, because they're exactly the same. Men playing God. That's why God depicted them all as a single giant statue of imperial man. Daniel chapter 2. We should not be surprised then that our modern day Cyruses and Caesars exploit alleged differences to compete with each other while advancing the same dictatorial designs. It was Joseph Stalin, after all, who first vilified his rivals as fascists so he could play the socialist hero, even though his socialism was every bit as dictatorial. So when you hear those today who brought you pandemic shutdowns and vaccine mandates calling their opponents fascists, just remember they got the playbook from their Uncle Joe. If we could bring back Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, Alexander, and Octavius, they would all be calling one another fascists. Potato, potato, tomato, tomato, socialism, communism, fascism, it's all statism. and statism by any name is still the same.